in the heart of Frankfurt, Germany, on June 12, 1929, a little girl was born who would one day become one of the most famous and enduring voices of the 20th century. Her name was Anneliese Marie Frank, though the world would come to know her simply as Anne Frank. When she was born, her parents, Otto and Edith Frank, could never have imagined that their youngest daughter's diary would later speak to millions of people across the globe, making her a symbol of resilience, innocence, and the cost of hatred. To understand Anne's story, one must travel back in time to a Europe slowly falling into the grip of darkness. Anne was the second daughter of Otto Frank, a kind and educated man who had served as an officer in the German army during the First World War. Otto was practical, disciplined, and had a deep sense of responsibility toward his family. Anne's mother, Edith, was gentle and caring, though often more traditional in her outlook. Anne also had an older sister, Margot Frank, born in 1926, who was quiet, studious, and serious-minded. While Margot often followed the rules and excelled in academics, Anne was lively, outspoken, and curious. From the very beginning, she was known for her sharp wit, playful humor, and boundless imagination. These differences between the two sisters would continue throughout their lives, but both were deeply loved by their parents. In the early years of Anne's childhood, Frankfurt was still a city recovering from the scars of the Great War. Inflation, unemployment, and political instability marked the lives of ordinary Germans. Yet the Franks lived a relatively comfortable life. Otto worked at his family's bank, and the children played happily in their neighborhood. For Anne, life was filled with small joys, games with friends, stories told by her mother, and the sense of security that only a close-knit family can provide. But beneath this surface of normalcy, a storm was brewing across Germany, one that would soon change everything. In 1933, when Anne was only 4 years old, Adolf Hitler and his Nazi party rose to power. The Nazis began implementing harsh anti-Jewish laws and spreading propaganda that blamed Jews for Germany's problems. Jewish families like the Franks quickly realized that life in Germany was becoming dangerous. Acts of discrimination became common. Jewish children were taunted in schools. Jewish businesses were boycotted, and Jewish professionals were forced out of their jobs. Otto Frank saw the writing on the wall and understood that Germany was no longer safe for his family. That same year, the Franks made the difficult decision to leave their homeland. They moved to Amsterdam in the Netherlands, hoping to find peace and a chance to rebuild their lives. For Anne, the move to Amsterdam was both frightening and exciting. She was too young to fully understand why her family had to leave Germany, but she quickly adjusted to her new environment. In Amsterdam, the Franks rented an apartment on Merwedeplein, a pleasant neighborhood where many other Jewish families also lived. Anne attended a Montessori school where her energetic personality flourished. Teachers noticed her bright mind, though they sometimes remarked that she could be talkative and stubborn. Still, her charm and curiosity won her many friends. Unlike Margot, who was quiet and studious, Anne was known as the social one, often the center of attention in her circle of friends. Amsterdam, during those first years, felt like a safe haven. The Netherlands was neutral and peaceful, and the Frank family began to feel at home. Otto started working for Opekta, a company that produced pectin, a substance used in making jam. The family celebrated birthdays, attended school, and enjoyed outings just like any other family. On Anne's 13th birthday in 1942, she received a red and white checkered diary from her parents. At the time, no one could have guessed that this little diary would one day become one of the most important documents of the 20th century. For Anne, it was simply a place to write her thoughts, her dreams, and her secrets. She even named it Kitty, imagining the diary as her closest friend with whom she could share everything. But the sense of safety the family felt in Amsterdam would not last. In May 1940, when Anne was just 10 years old, Nazi Germany invaded the Netherlands. The country fell quickly, and the once peaceful streets of Amsterdam were soon filled with German soldiers, swastika flags, and harsh new restrictions for Jews. At first, the changes were gradual. Jews were required to register with the authorities, and Jewish children were forced to attend separate schools. Anne and Margot had to leave their schools and move to the Jewish Lyceum. Soon, Jews were banned from riding bicycles, going to public parks, or even sitting in certain sections of theaters. every Jewish person was forced to wear a yellow Star of David on their clothing, marking them as targets of discrimination. Anne, with her sharp mind and strong sense of justice, found these rules humiliating. She did not understand why she and her family had to be treated differently simply because they were Jewish. Yet, despite the restrictions, she tried to live like any other teenager. She spent time with her friends, giggled about boys she liked, and dreamed of one day becoming a writer or journalist. In her diary, she recorded her daily experiences, often in a lively and detailed manner, capturing not only the events around her, but also the emotions that filled her young heart. The situation, however, continued to worsen. By 1942, rumors spread that Jews were being deported from the Netherlands to labor camps in Germany and Poland. Few people knew the full truth that these camps were actually centers of mass murder. On July 5, 1942, Anne's sister, Margot, received a call-up notice to report for labor duty in Germany. Otto and Edith Frank knew immediately that this was a death sentence. They had already been preparing a secret hiding place in the back of Otto's office building on Prinsengracht, a narrow street in Amsterdam. The time had come to put their plan into action. The very next day, July 6th, the Frank family left their apartment, leaving behind everything they owned. They walked quietly through the streets of Amsterdam, carrying only a few bags. Anne wore several layers of clothing, since carrying suitcases would have been too suspicious. At just 13 years old, Anne was stepping into a world of hiding and fear that would last for more than 2 years. The hiding place, later known as the Secret Annex, was located at 263 Prinsengracht behind the Opekta office. From the outside, the building looked like any other on the street, but behind a movable bookcase was a hidden entrance leading to a small series of rooms. The Franks were joined there by another family, the Van Pels, Herman, August, and their teenage son Peter. Later, a dentist named Fritz Pfeffer also came into hiding with them. Altogether, 8 people lived in the cramped annex, cut off from the outside world, dependent on the help of a few trusted employees like Miep Gies, who risked their lives to bring food, supplies, and news. For Anne, life in the annex was both terrifying and suffocating. During the day, they had to remain completely silent, afraid that the workers in the warehouse below would hear them. No one could flush the toilet, walk in shoes, or even whisper too loudly. At night, they could move more freely, but the fear of discovery never left them. Anne wrote in her diary about the frustrations of living in such close quarters, the arguments, the boredom, the lack of privacy. At the same time, she wrote about her hopes, her dreams, and her determination to stay strong. Through her words, she gave life to the voices of millions of Jews who could not speak. Life in the Secret Annex was extremely difficult. During the day, they had to remain so quiet that the people working in the office below would not become suspicious. Even the smallest sound could put their lives in danger. Anne wrote in her diary about how she would walk for hours with the softest steps, and sometimes she was even afraid to breathe too loudly. Hunger was another constant struggle. Food supplies were scarce, and they had to survive mostly on potatoes, dry bread, and occasionally some vegetables. Anne often wrote about how tired she became of eating the same food every day. Yet, at the same time, she remained grateful that at least they were still alive. The fear of war and the constant bombing shook their spirits. At night, when explosions echoed outside, everyone in the annex would gather in one room, holding on to each other for comfort. It was during these dark days that Anne's friendship with Peter grew deeper. The two of them often sat near the attic window, peeking outside at the sky, weaving dreams of freedom. For Anne, being with Peter made her forget, even if only for a moment, the prison-like walls that surrounded them. Yet deep inside, she knew those dreams were only temporary escapes. Anne's diary became the voice of her heart. She did not just write about her daily life and emotions, but also about war, politics, and her vision for the future. She longed for the day when her diary would be published as a book, so the world could understand what an ordinary girl endured during the horrors of war. This dream gave her strength, even in the final days of hiding. But that dream was cut short. On August 4th, 1944, Nazi soldiers suddenly stormed the annex. Someone had betrayed them. The soldiers arrested everyone and forced them into a truck. First, they were taken to a camp in the Netherlands, and later deported to Auschwitz. From there, they were separated and sent to different concentration camps. Anne and her sister Margot were transferred to Bergen-Belsen, a camp where life was unbearable. There was no proper food, no medical care, and no hygiene. Cold and disease spread quickly. Margot died first, and only a few days later, 15-year-old Anne Frank also left this world. After the war ended, Otto Frank, Anne's father, was the only survivor. Returning to Amsterdam, he was devastated to learn that his wife and both daughters were gone forever. It was then that Miep Gies, one of the brave helpers from the Annex, handed him Anne's diary, which she had kept safe. Determined to fulfill his daughter's wish, Otto edited and published the diary in 1947 under the title The Diary of a Young Girl. The book quickly became famous around the world. Anne Frank's diary was not merely the writing of a teenage girl. It became a mirror for humanity. It revealed how war, hatred, and cruelty can destroy innocent lives. Today, Anne Frank is remembered across the globe. Her small room, her diary, and her story continue to inspire millions of people to reflect on the true value of freedom. Anne once wrote in her diary, "I want to go on living even after my death." And indeed, even after so many years, the world not only remembers her, but also continues to learn from her words. And so, the voice of Anne Frank continues to echo through the pages of her diary. Though her life was cut short, her words remain eternal. They remind us of the price of hatred, the fragility of freedom, and the unbreakable strength of hope. Anne once dreamed of becoming a writer, and in a way, she became far more than that. She became the voice of millions who could not speak. Her story is not just history. It is a warning, a lesson, and a light for generations to come. May we never forget Anne Frank, and may her words guide us toward a world of compassion, justice, and peace.